All right, it is right now time to bring in David Tereshchuk. It's time for the Media Beat. David joins us every Friday morning. He has his own, of course, website, themediabeat.us. He's also a PBS television correspondent reporting on ethics and belief. And yes, there's always something to talk about with the Media Beat. Good morning, David.
Well, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm good. You know, it's we're right before entering into the weekend before Christmas, which falls on a Tuesday, Christmas Eve, and then Christmas on a Wednesday. So it really is going to bust up the cycle the next couple of days.
I think you'll manage.
Somehow. I think so. Well, I have to tell you, as a child who's lived through Watergate, as an adult,
you were a very young child at the time of Watergate, I'm sure.
I was just out of high school in my first radio job.
When you were in a sense covering, or you were having to include it in whatever live coverage you might have been anchoring. Huh?
I always said I was back at WKNY in Kingston, New York, and we had a salesman that lived with me by the name of Phil Nero. He went out and sold it the coverage to Chicken Delight. That's no lie. So every time there was a CBS report or our report, don't cook tonight, call Chicken Delight. That's what I remember from Richard Nixon's
the
days.
joys of commercial broadcasting.
Yeah. And then, of course, there was Bill Clinton, his impeachment, and now Donald Trump. It's amazing that it's been around for several.
Considering there are only ever 4, or if you count a near impeachment of Nixon, only 4 of these events in the entire history of the United States. It's amazing that we've lived through 3 of them. Right?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Either that means we're really old or the country is really crumbling.
Yeah, the rate of impeachment occurrence, at least, is quickening. And, of course, the threat from the Republican side, of course, is one of the reasons they're so against it, they say, of course, is that impeachment could become the new normal, that every second or even every president could fall prey to Congress's impeaching it if they go ahead, if they were, and of course they won't, go ahead with finding him guilty in this impeachment process.
And once again, Nancy Pelosi, she can only do this for a short while, but actually they voted on impeachment at the right time because you're going into the Christmas break. So she does not have to send this along to the Senate really basically until after the first of the year. She can stonewall a little bit as they try to negotiate a better deal with the Senate, but they're not getting a better deal from the Senate at all.
But as the media has covered Mitch McConnell saying, it's hard to see what leverage comes the Democrats' way from not sending to the Senate something the Senate doesn't want in the first place.
I think what they're looking for, or what they're hoping for, is because the Supreme Court took up the case of Donald Trump's blanket barring of people to testify. I think they were hoping for some sort of ruling on that by the first of the year or right after.
Buying some time in the meantime to get more ammunition, I guess, for the hearing, such as it will be.
But I still don't think
the Senate. Yeah.
I think Jesus could come down himself and go on the Senate floor and say, listen, this really did happen. I still don't think you're going to get 20 Republican senators to flip. I just don't.
Of course not. No, it's a done deal, and that in a sense is why media coverage is so peculiarly hollow at the moment. Do you get that feeling that on Thursday, as everyone was reflecting on the vote from the House of Representatives, indeed as they were reporting its progress towards that vote the previous day, the media was going crazy with that word historic. It was echoing around the networks and the cable channels incessantly, just how historic this was. And yet we all know that, not to be wholly cynical about it, it may be historic, but it's actually meaningless in terms of it's the inevitable outcome. The man is going to be impeached, but he's not going to be removed. And I think just about every citizen who's aware about the whole process knows that. So the whole thing rings very hollow indeed.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Still an interesting procedure to watch in the way it's being handled, and we'll have to see what happens from there on out. But David, you're going to have to explain something to me now. Did you watch the debate last night?
It was hard to miss, especially for someone whose job is to cover the media. Yeah. Are you going by any chance going to ask about the final question?
No. Before I get
go ahead. What do you have to ask about?
Before I get to that, and I'm sorry, I was in debate club, and when your time was up, your time was up. And I cannot believe with the modern networks and you've got a person sitting in at an audio control board. When that clock goes up, all you have to do is turn the mic off. And that way everybody gets equal time.
Yeah, they do it in Congress. They do it, and they can certainly do it in any radio program or any live TV program. Yes. Why are people allowed to? This is the more important question. Why are people allowed to overrun that time inexcusably in many cases?
Oh, Elizabeth.
I mean, not just to complete a sentence, but to run over and start new points. Even.
Elizabeth Warren is the champion of that. I couldn't believe she just wouldn't stop. I mean, but anyway, so then
at the very end, she apologized. She said, when given the choice of making a gift or asking people's forgiveness, she asked to be forgiven for sometimes getting fired up. Indeed, that was the theme. That was the female answer. It was one of the distressing things about that very peculiar final question: give a gift or ask for forgiveness. And the women were the ones who asked for forgiveness, and for forgiveness for being fired up, as if somehow there's something wrong with that. And I don't think I'd venture to suggest that no male candidate would ever want to apologize for being fired up.
Well, no, but and what's interesting about Elizabeth Warren, she being fired up is one thing, but everybody on that debate stage. And that's why I beg one of these days. First of all, they're not really debates because there's too many people to do a real proper debate. It would take too long. But one of these days, someone at the networks will say, you know what, we're going to put a mute on this, and after, when the time is up, the time is up, and you just move on. You just move on to the next person because that's what makes debating a great. And I'll say sport. When I was in debate club. Everybody had the same amount of time to deliver their material and the same amount of rebuttal time. Everybody. And that's what makes debates truly great.
Yeah, the formalization of the whole process is part of its purpose in the first place, and I agree. It's become something of a irregulated free for all. And that's not what a debate is about. The whole point about a debate is to provide a confining structure in which people can formally, in a very formal sense, so that the field is absolutely leveled. It can, be assessed in a comparative sense. This person is a better promoter of their ideas than that person, and to do that, you need to level the field to make the comparisons.
You know what I'd like people to do? I know if they videotape the debates, go back and watch 2 or 3 debates in a row. I mean, right in a row.
Oh God! You're cruel and unusual punishment.
Well, really, because there's 2 things you'll see. You'll see that Bernie Sanders says the same thing over and over again. He's got his, and I love Bernie, but he's got his line, and that's what it is. And you'll notice that he doesn't attack anybody. He really doesn't. He brings into question a couple of times, but he doesn't harp on it. But you'll also then notice the shifting tides. You'll see what candidate is fresh chum. And it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yep.
It's amazing to watch. And I think sooner or later the Democrats have to get that debate those people down to 3 or 4 people, because otherwise it's ludicrous. You can't really follow.
I guess one interesting straw in the wind right now is that Buttigieg's turn was last night. He was the fresh chum. He got most of the personal attacks, I guess.
Yeah, Elizabeth Warren went after, but she also had the best line of the night when they said to her, you'll be the oldest person elected president, yeah. And then she said, "Yes, but I'll be the youngest woman." Now that was
the youngest woman ever to be inaugurated. Yeah.
That was a great line. To me, that was the best line of the night. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. Well, in rehearsal, I'm sure in their own private rehearsals, they honed that one down. I'm sure.
Well, now let's go over. It's like whenever Hillary Clinton pops up and starts babbling about the presidential race, I always scream, "Hillary, please just go away." And now I can do this over in Europe. Jeremy, I love Jeremy Corbyn, but Jeremy, go away. Really, go away, Jeremy.
No, I know. One of the strongest, the strongest expressions that someone had really made a terrible mess of a campaign came in his apology. He did actually apologize for losing, apologize to his supporters for losing, but at the same time he just had to say, "But we won the argument."
Yeah.
What an interesting concept.
Just go away, Jeremy. I'm one of the few people. I don't think he's anti-Semitic. I think he's, I think he's a guy that has an agenda and keeps pushing that agenda. And I agree with most of the things on his agenda. But when you lose this badly, it would be like Michael Dukakis coming out right after he lost that badly, and stating something. "Michael, go away. Let it rest for a while."
Yeah.
Your supporters are always going to support you even when you lose, but they won't support you if you keep showing up. I'm sorry.
Yeah. There's a wonderful piece of poetry circulating right now. I don't know if you ever saw the British television program Spitting Image back in the 80s, but it was an extraordinary bit of political satire through puppetry. And it had a wonderful script. So one of the script writers was a man called Alistair Beaton. And he has satirized this apology business of Corbyn saying that we won the argument in a wonderful takeoff of a tune you'll know well. I am the model of a modern Major General from Gilbert and Sullivan. Let me just read you a few choice lines. I'm still the favourite son of all the people who anointed me. It's just the British public who have badly disappointed me. It's just the British public who have badly disappointed him. That's the chorus, of course. And then Corbyn comes back saying, "Electoral disaster, I implore you to be fair about. At least we won the argument, and that is all I care about. And so, with fearless certainty and absolute entitlement, I am the very model of political enlightenment."
That is very good.
I'm afraid his self-righteousness is pinpricked there. It's perfectly put up on a pin for us to recognize. And it's strange to see a politician so incapable of taking the resounding rebuff that the British public gave him.
And it's. I know it's hard for normal people to look at what politicians go through and what they, it makes your skin want to crawl. But politicians at this level, I don't care in what country you're at, they're not like you or I. They're just not. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm glad I'm not like them.
I know. It's a whole different psyche and makeup. It really is. And I don't think people understand how different it is and what it's like. It used to be when people went to Washington, D.C., they would serve their term and come back home, and they go to their farms or their general stores. And it's not that way anymore. These are hardened really professional politicians, and just it's I don't know how to explain it, but I think that's one of the big problems we have. Everything's so cut and dry now, and everybody's so hardened into their positions. Democrats.
I was interviewing someone once who was not a politician, but obviously exercised huge influence on politics, and that was Archbishop Desmond Tutu in South Africa. And we were talking about the way that he'd been excoriated by his opponents, Robert Mugabe in particular at the time. But he was a little pained when I quoted to him all the nasty things that were said about him by Mugabe in particular. But then his face broke out into just a huge grin, and he said, "Oh, I learned to have a skin like a rhinoceros."
Yeah,
so I guess that's what you do when you tread into the realms of public politics. You develop a skin like a rhinoceros.
And if you're smart, don't ever look at Twitter or Facebook.
Well, yeah.
But so
look at the numbers. That's all. Don't dwell on the things being said.
So we had the election in Great Britain. We have, of course, the impeachment hearings, which came to an end in the House, and sooner or later will go to the Senate. And then you have
briefly, in all likelihood, at least, the time that it spends in the Senate. I mean.
But you go beyond that, and you look at the Democrats' debate, and even you look at the election in Great Britain. There are so many worldwide issues that really affect countries now. I mean, you have what's going on in Hong Kong and China. You have what's going on, of course, now with Brexit coming, the border with Northern Ireland. You have Scotland. I mean, all of this coming into the mix. You have the turmoil in the United States. It's a pretty ugly scene worldwide.
Sure. I mean, in a sense, we only get the bad scenes reported. On the whole, that's almost in the nature of news. But there is a remarkable kind of not necessarily complete consistency, but certainly an echo and a chime around every single continent at the moment. Popular discontent, evidencing itself in the streets mostly, but in other ways too, and all sorts of regimes, countrywide. Dictatorships developing almost at every turn. The world's greatest democracy, for instance, a phrase that's often used to describe India, in the sense that it is the most populous democracy in the world, now behaving very differently, introducing a disturbing degree of identity politics to its concept of citizenship, meaning that Muslims are now downgraded in new legislation. And you've also got the Indian authorities demonstrating their technological capacity. I mean, India has benefited enormously by being at the forefront of the digital revolution. You just say the name Bangalore, and you know about the incredible intensity that India has brought to the digital revolution that has overtaken us as a whole, but India to the fore of it. But they've demonstrated that they can just shut off the internet in a way very reminiscent of China, and just put down the one element of Indian progress that has surprised the rest of the world so extraordinarily. And then you just move across the globe, and you look at countries like Hungary, and of course the old Soviet Union's habits of those days coming back in the new Russia. The capacity for popular dissent to be squashed by oligarchic and tyrannical processes is being echoed again and again as we move across the globe.
And then we can even turn to France. Look at the disruption that's going on in France.
Sure, and swing across to Latin America. Chile is in the biggest turmoil it's seen since the 1970s. Everywhere you look, well, I mean, this is a rhetorical exaggeration, but you can look in every direction and see a lot of this popular discontent, plus harsh measures from authorities, which is usually a sign that the authorities are wavering and eventually will crumble. But I'm not so sure about that.
You have to go to countries like Sweden and stuff like that to have warm, heartwarming news. Sorry, like honest to gosh, it's just been a real rough couple of months, and we wrap up the year going into it. There's so much uncertainty. Yeah, I'll put it that way. There's so much uncertainty in governments that for so long were, I want to say, stable. I mean, you just look all around and. The only ones that are really stable now seem to be China and Russia. Countries with stern leadership.
Not the kind of stability I would want to live in. But,
no.
Yeah.
Jill Goodman is here. Hello, Jill.
Did David just say? I hope he just said those aren't exactly democracies.
Yes.
Okay.
I said they were the kind of stable places I wouldn't want to. It's the kind of stability I would not want to live in. That's what I said.
Well,
and that's true. I mean, stability is something that American foreign policy used to encourage, and of course that really meant buying into supporting dictators, and that's. I mean, it's at odds with America's formerly traditional role of encouraging democracy in imitation of its own efforts, of course, to establish a country that was essentially based on the idea of overthrowing monarchy and establishing democracy.
it has also done its own fair share of meddling, I will say, but that's all right. We don't talk about
Absolutely.
that. I'm a big proponent of history beginning at the point of time most convenient to the argument.
No, it's true. The United States has meddled in a lot of different places, but it's meddled in those places. In the beginning, they were invited to meddle, but now we don't have to be invited to meddle.
No. And I don't know whose playbook we're really using. Is it Vlad the Impaler, or is it just us?
Just after the revolution.
That's right. But
yes, I mean the playbook's been around for a long time.
But what I was listening to both of you, and I thought you did please excuse me. I thought you both did a bang up job. And what I was curious about, and I'm going to ruin the last bit of your show by asking, but I'm interested in Marshall's view as well. How do we talk a lot about media literacy. How do you correct, and that is one thing, how do you correct mass quantities, quoting the Coneheads, of basically propaganda and what Marshall's grandmother used to call bologna sauce that is so now just impacted. It's just smushed into the information pool. It's bad, and I don't know.
It used to be called disinformation when it was done in various small attacks, but now it's no longer disinformation. It is
propaganda.
Well, the digital revolution has brought us many good things, but it has brought us the extraordinary amplification of that whole process. A process which, as we just said, has been around forever. But disinformation has been
it's a tool,
a tactic, of enormously long-lived. Sort of permanence is what I'd say it has, but how to turn the clock back now is one of the most difficult questions I think the media overall now has to face. We try so hard, in terms of providing instant fact checking, or even just thoughtful and reflective fact checking. But that's not going to stem the tide. We all know that. Something much more radical, in the sense of quite literally getting down to the roots of all of this, is what is needed. I think, as so often when we get to the subject of media literacy, it comes to inevitable necessity for re-educating people at base, and it probably starts in kindergarten. I think we probably need to start people on a course very early in their lives of questioning what they receive, and getting over the inevitable consequence of so much information being available to us so easily. Get over the idea that we can just be receivers now. We can't just be receiving stations in our own right. We have to question everything that comes to us, and it used to be called in quieter times critical thinking as a faculty that needs to be developed in every student.
It's
but
interesting.
Boy, is it needed now in a much more amplified
But
manner.
at the same time, go on, Marshall.
It's interesting because now whenever I read something on the internet, I will search out the story from multiple sources to see if it's accurate. I just don't. I will not take one quick glance at something and think that it's accurate. I just won't.
How do we imbue that
you don't
habit
count
in every single person?
with-
That's
with-
the difficulty. Trained journalists like yourself will do that almost instinctively.
And
but-
have done it all. Plus, Marshall, way back when you used to be an internet monitor, I have to continually remind him that he has a different relationship than just regular people do. The problem is at the same time that you are saying, think critically, check information sources, not you, but just in general, you're, with the other hand, saying, oh, here, we're going to give you fact-checking. Here, we're going to give you a checking account, as a matter of fact. We're Facebook. Here, this is your life. Here, live inside this box. So it makes it a bit...
Oh, right. I mean, it cuts to the heart of a kind of moral quandary almost in every single media outfit. You ought to say, we're telling you the truth.
Yeah.
We are the reliable source. But at the same time, you're saying question everything that is said, including by us, by
Right.
the way.
But very quietly.
The best organs of communication do that. I mean, the whole idea of an ombudsman or a public editor or someone to represent the consumer within the portals of the media organization itself is a noble attribute as well, and a noble ambition. But to get it all woven into a media world that is useful to the public that consumes it means that we've got to re-educate the public.
And with that, we will begin next year, or possibly
Our
next.
project for 2020:
That's
re-educate the public. Yes,
Good.
absolutely.
Piece of cake. We'll have it done in the first quarter. Thank you very along with the impeachment. Thank you very much, David Tereshchuk, the Media Beat.